Hey guys, what is going on and welcome to another video. If you are new here, my name is Instinct and today we're going to do something that I don't usually do, which is talk about ESO, or the Elderscrolls Online. Now why should you listen to anything that I have to say? And the answer is, you probably shouldn't. I'm just a random idiot on the internet. And a couple of things I'd like to note up front is I've never been an MMO guy. No MMO has ever been able to keep my attention for more than the length of a sneeze. I just generally do not enjoy them. Another thing I'd like to note before I get into the video is I was one of those people that absolutely hated ESO to begin with. As somebody who was lucky enough to grow up with all of the Elder Scrolls games and not just start with Skyrim, and the way that this game was marketed, there was a certain formula that was expected to be met, one which was never going to be able to be met as we know now, and the game was an absolute train wreck when it released. However, I went away for some years and returned from time to time to do a couple of the PvE things, and I'm so glad that I did, because now it falls into a category of some of my favourite games of all time. So that again begs the question, then why should you listen to anything that I say? And as I stated before, you probably shouldn't. But as somebody who is brand new coming into the PvP scene, to the point where that's pretty much what I main now, it may be nice for you to get away from what I've noticed to be a pretty toxic creator community, and maybe get a fresh perspective. Now I want to expand a little further on what I mean by it being a toxic creator community. And what I mean by that basically is there seems to be a lot of creators out there that just seem to complain for the sake of complaining. And weirdly enough, usually when it's a situation like this, it's actually the bigger creators that do it. But I don't think so far I've seen any big creators that are like this, or at least they haven't come across that way to me. It seems to be a lot of the smaller creators, to be honest. And now I'm not saying you can't complain about stuff in the game or anything like that, but what I am saying is these people seem to just complain for the sake of it. It almost seems as though they're looking for things to complain about. They're the type of people where if you learn to walk on water, they'd literally say the only reason you do that is because you can't swim. Now the problem with that, and the problem that I have noticed, is that they're going to attract people that are exactly like them. Not always necessarily for the same reason they're like them and they're complaining, but nonetheless they will attract people that are just going to constantly complain, or basically support any complaint that they make regardless of whether it's true or not, just because said creator said something about it. One of the best ways I could think about describing it is kind of how Bill Burr said about his pet dog. I don't know if anyone watches Bill Burr or any of his comedy stuff, but basically he was getting all amped up and yelling at the TV over like a football match or something like that, and he said he didn't realize how amped up the dog was getting just because he was getting amped up. The dog didn't understand why he was getting amped up or necessarily the reasons behind it, but basically the dog in the corner is going, yeah, fuck you. This guy's angry, so I'm angry. And that's the way, unfortunately, it seems to be a lot of the time with these communities is, even if the creator does make a very good point sometimes, their community doesn't fully understand what they're saying and just tends to get pissed off because they're pissed off, and then without even knowing what they're pissed off about, they run with it, and it just goes haywire from there. Now be honest with yourself, how many times have you joined one of their streams or watched their videos and they're always whinging about something? Like, my mans could be taking on 7 people at once, he's winning, and he's still fucking complaining. Like, there's 8 people there, 7 of them die to him, and then he gets killed by the 8th guy, and he's like, oh, the lag, Zos needs to fix the lag in Cyrodiil. Now I want to be perfectly clear on something, I'm not saying that there is not lag in Cyrodiil, but these people are running around on 110, 120 ms, and they miss a global, and that's what's getting them killed, and then they're fucking crying about it. Like, my guy, you probably shouldn't even be able to take on 7 people directly anyway. It's a little bit different if you're kiting them out and taking them out one by one, but you probably shouldn't be able to directly take on 7 people anyway. But it just seems really strange to me for these people to be winning such large fights, and they have 110 ms, and they're fucking complaining about missing a global and blaming it on lag, when it's like, my guy, I'm from Australia. I'm usually sitting pretty close to 300 ms at all times. If I miss a single ability, I'm dead. And yeah, sometimes it does get really bad, especially for somebody who really likes to play Nightblades and things that are really squishy. But the way these guys are talking about it, it makes it seem 10 times worse than it is. Like, for me playing this game with the amount of players that are in it at any one time and the amount of stuff that's going on and abilities going off, the near 300 ms that I'm experiencing really isn't that bad. Now, does that make the performance and stuff like that acceptable? Absolutely not. My point is, a lot of these creators are just using it as an excuse to cry about it when it's actually themselves that are causing them to die. But because their community sees them complaining about it, they then run with it. And now I've had my fair share of toxic relationships with games over the years, and there's always one that comes to mind, and anyone who has watched my channel knows exactly what I'm going to say, and that is definitely, without a question of a doubt, Ark Survival Evolved. Now, if you do happen to be new to this channel and you're an ESO player, there's probably a good chance that you don't know what Ark is fully, or you don't understand what it's about, and I'm basically going to nutshell it for you because it's a whole topic on its own. Think of a game basically like how you grind your sets in ESO, but instead of grinding sets, you're grinding up blueprints. with said blueprints, you'll make multiple of the sets, because obviously when you die, you drop your equipment. Right now, you have to farm pretty hard to get some of these really good blueprints to make said gear. Just like you would in Elderscrolls Online to farm up some good gear, it takes a long time. Except for the fact is, you can lose it and then have to restart all over again. Now this added to some of the fun of the game. You know, that was part of the grind to go out and try. You could either PvP to get stuff or you could PvE to get stuff. However, towards the end and still up to this day, the game literally lost the plot. For anyone that has played the game, they know that the development team for that game is utterly useless. And 300 ping on that game, now that is bad. Like, I've been trying to fight people and they've been literally teleporting all around the place. And you can't really lock on aim to people in there. Well, some people can. But when you're trying to shoot somebody with a precision weapon in PvP and they're teleporting all around the place, it's a pretty big deal. But why I got out of that game in particular is because, now imagine with what I've told you, that it's so hard to get all of this stuff. On top of that, to breed the dinos or creatures within the game, which are basically like your mounts in ESO, except you can actually combat off of them, to be able to compete with the top tier players in the game, which can attack you at any one time they feel like it, whether you're ready or not, you have to grow these creatures and some of them can take weeks. On top of that, there's a lot of real money trading that goes on so people even have a chance to compete. And obviously when you add money to the game, that brings out cheaters. And pretty much that was why I left in the end, because there was not a single day that went past that you was not getting aimbotted, you was not getting meshed, which basically, for those of you that don't know what meshing is, you build a base to keep all of your stuff safe and you have turrets that are supposed to shoot enemy players and like give you an early warning sign and chance to fight back and defend your base. All that sort of stuff. Well, basically what meshing is they get underneath the map or in the walls of the map, and then they just bypass your turrets and all of your defenses and then just blow it all up from the inside pretty much. And then, as if that isn't bad enough, there's people that's still inside to this day, which everyone knows what inside is, I don't have to explain that. And there's no real good bulletproof way to prevent it. It's just not a game that's worth investing time into, and that's why I got out of it in the first place. And then the cheating started to run rampant, and the development team started giving away free accounts, and it just got worse from that point on. And as I stated before, the development team is utterly useless and they had no intention of fixing it because they were already working on the second one. Half the time they don't even answer tickets that you put in. So I guess when you think of all of that stuff, you can see why I think that the stuff you deal with in ESO really is not that bad. If anything ever gives me the shits enough, I can just log off of ESO and I'm not going to lose my stuff. If you did that in Ark, that was it. That was a wrap. You lost everything. The next thing I want to talk about is the actual player community. How has the player community been? As we know in PvP, players can be extremely toxic, and from time to time I get a whisper here and there, but overall the community has actually been pretty good. There are a couple of guilds that were willing to accept me with absolutely no problem. Hell, I even had a random guy offer to make me some gear for free, and this gear cost him quite a bit in game. Now obviously I know players have some pretty stupid amounts of money in the game, but I mean, he really didn't have to do it for free, and he did. So overall I'd say that the player community has actually been pretty good. There's the odd bad egg in amongst them, but for the most part, no, the community has been pretty good. Now I'm going to have my say about ZOS here, and I know somewhere in the world somebody's going to be writing right now, here we go, hypocrite. No, because I'm not trying to just complain about things for the sake of complaints. I actually want to give reason behind it and hopefully make it make a bit more sense. I don't want to just endlessly complain about things because I'm losing a fight that I shouldn't be winning in the first place. Now, as you know, in recent times, one of the updates actually broke the game. But basically, Cyrodiil suffered the worst of it. There was siege equipment absolutely everywhere. And it wasn't despawning and the servers were getting hella laggy because of it. And now that was actual lag. That's what I call lag. And it just wasn't a good time. And then there's been the block and bug and stuff like that. Now ZOS, I must say, is pretty slow when it comes to fixing stuff like that. Like, they don't want to roll out patches early. They do them at a set time, which I don't know if that's the best way to do it. Like, I get there's a lot of preparation and stuff like that that goes into it to try and make sure they go as smoothly as possible. And now I know somewhere one of those creators I was talking about is laughing, because that never really ends up happening. There's always bugs. There always will be, and there's always going to be for the foreseeable future. That's just the nature of game development. It's not just exclusive to ESO. But I don't know, I think they do need to figure something out when there's a major bug, like something that's actually breaking the game badly, because waiting a fortnight for something to be fixed and then it doesn't make it into the patch, and then you've got to wait for the next rounds to be made for it to get done again, and it's like, oh, I don't know, for something that breaks the game, a month's a long time to wait. Like I said, I'm not trying to say that it's not okay to complain about stuff in the game, but there seems to be a lot of stuff that's being complained about that really doesn't need to be. Like, one of the things that came to mind was that ESO looks terrible, or ESO showing its age, and then they go and play another MMO that looks 10 times worse, but came out after ESO. And it's like, what the hell are you complaining about? Like, it makes no sense. And I hear people say, oh, look at how Black Desert Online looks. And it's like, don't even get me started with Black Desert Online. Holy, that's a topic in its own. I could do a whole video on that alone. I played Black Desert Online, and I gotta say, I really liked the aesthetics of it. And it was the first sort of hack and slash style MMO I've ever played, and I really enjoyed that about it. But after about 3 hours of doing the same exact thing I was doing when I started the game, I said to the Discord, to the guys I was playing with, has anybody else actually done anything other than run around in circles, going from one person to another and just interacting with them, then run back to the other person? And we all kind of got deflated. It was like, no, legit, that's all you do. Like, I could watch paint dry and it'd be more entertaining than Black Desert Online. I do not get why people are so interested in that game, because it is the most boring fucking thing I've ever done in my life. If you gave me the choice between play Black Desert Online or don't play anything at all, I'd be selling my PC setup 100%. I really do not get the attraction to Black Desert Online. But I just don't get why so many people say that ESO looks terrible and then they go play a game like Guild Wars 2 and it's like, how the fuck do you think that looks better than ESO? It looks worse. Zooming your camera out further doesn't make your game look any better just because you can't see the details, I'm sorry to say. But then you go look at the way that they're playing ESO and they're playing it on the lowest of the low settings. And it's like, no wonder yours looks like shit. I'm playing mine pretty much maxed out and it looks pretty good. Like, as good as it needs to. I don't need an MMO to look amazing. Like, as cool as that would be, I don't need it to look that good. I'm not focusing on minute details constantly. A majority of the time there's so much shit happening that I'm not even focusing on what's going on around me. And I know for a fact that ESO can run on some PCs that don't even have a graphics card. So I'm not sure why so many of these big streamers are running their games on the lowest possible settings. It doesn't make any sense to me. But anyway, moving on, we're getting pretty close to wrapping it up now, and I just want to talk about what do I think that ESO does do right. Alright, one of the things I want to talk about that they do well that they never seem to get the credit for is back when the pandemic was a thing. As we know, there's quarterly releases for major updates, and even though most people were working from home, I think there was one that got delayed by like a small amount. It was like a week or something like that, but they still managed to keep everything consistent. Whereas every other company out there was making excuses why they couldn't make deadlines, constantly pushing things back months and months and months. Still, somehow they managed to make it happen, and they never seem to get the appreciation for that at all. What else does ZOS do well? Another thing that I think they do well is the way that you build your characters. As I said, I'm not an MMO guy. A lot of people don't seem to like the building of characters in ESO because they're more in favor of how other MMOs do it. But for me, it feels more in depth on ESO, and I enjoy that style a lot more. It seems a lot more fast paced. Like, there's heaps of different sets that I can combine with a certain combination of CP, and then within those sets I can enchant them with a certain thing to get a certain effect out of it, and there's just so many different possible combinations. That's what makes it interesting for me. Whereas there's been a lot of other ones that I play and it's just basically unga bunga, get this set, unga bunga strong. Like, that's not fun for me. And I'm not knocking anybody who does find that fun, I'm just saying for me personally, that is not fun. I don't like the idea of there's just one god tier set, I get that, and I put it on, I'm good. Think back to Destiny 1. Even though that's not even close, and arguably not even an MMO at all, if you played Destiny 1 during its peak in PvP, you know exactly what weapons were being used without even having to think about it. It was the meter multi-tool and the meter mini-tool. And everybody who was a sweat was running it. Everybody. There was nothing else. And I don't find that entertaining. I'm sure there probably is people out there, but for me, if there's one particular set or one particular item that's completely dominating absolutely everything else, that's just not fun. I like variety, I like seeing what builds I can make, and I like having different options. And expanding on that, another thing that I think they do well is the combat, when it works. I'm not saying that it's perfect, and I'm not saying that no doubt there isn't a couple of times in there where your abilities don't go off, because I've seen that myself. What I simply am saying is that it's not as bad as what people sometimes make it out to be. But for the most part, especially in PvP for ESO, when the combat works, it is a thing of absolute beauty. And I think there's probably a lot of creators out there that actually agree on that, is that ESO's PvP combat stands up there with some of the best. Again, as I said, it's not perfect, but it's definitely better than a lot of the others out there. A lot of the proof in that is you'll see people that are bad-mouthing it, they go off and they play something like Guild Wars 2 or something like that, and then sure enough 3 days later you look at their stream and guess what they're playing. Surely we can all agree on it, ESO PvP just hits different. The other thing that I think that ESO does really well that a lot of other MMOs don't, and it's, I don't know, it might be completely irrelevant to a lot of people out there, is the way that questing works. Like, there's a lot of the little side quests that they're just there, you know, leave them or take them sort of thing. But a lot of them actually have decent dialogue, and some of them actually have some pretty funny dialogue.
Khajiit tied himself up and is trying new fur cleaning solution. What does it look like? Khajiit was captured. The goblin snuck off to find carrots, he thinks. Khajiit must taste good with carrots. Don't tie Khajiit, he has offer for you.
And a lot of people won't get to experience it because they're too busy mashing through it all to skip it. But if you actually ever want to slow down and listen to some of it, or some of them are actually pretty decent. Now, I've played MMOs before where you'll go around and you accept these little side quests and the character won't even talk or anything like that. Like, there's no effort put in whatsoever. It's just writing on the screen essentially. And yeah, I'm going to skip through that. If I wanted to read, I'd be reading a book, not playing a game. So for the questing side of things, yeah, I'd say that ESO probably does it one of the best. Even a lot of the throwaway dialogue is actually pretty good. But of course, if you don't like that sort of thing, you still have the option of skipping through it. I just want to talk a little bit about metas before we wrap it up, because I know for a fact if this video does manage to get some attention for whatever reason, that there's going to be the exact people that I was talking about that are just going to say that I was meat riding Zos, when that's not the case at all. I'm not trying to say that things are perfect, and an example of that is that I really don't like the way that the metas are done in this game. It could be me personally, I don't know. It's just my opinion, but I don't think the tank meta needs to be a thing. It doesn't make much sense to me to have a tank meta where you're walking around with double if not more the HP of everybody else, stupid amounts of resistances, and still really high DPS capabilities. As if that doesn't sound bad enough, when you finally do whittle one of them down, they press one button and then they go back to full HP pretty much, and the whole cycle repeats. Because in my eyes, balancing isn't to the point where everything is dumbed down. In my eyes, balancing should work in the sense of not that nothing is overpowered, but that everything is overpowered but in its own unique way. Like if you have a sneaky assassin style character, they should be able to one-shot people. However, if they get caught, they should die very quickly. That should be the trade-off. Or if you have a tanky character, they should be able to take a lot of damage, group enemies up and crowd control a lot of them for their team, and be rather difficult to kill, but they shouldn't be able to dish out stupid amounts of damage. And obviously for a healer, they should be really good at keeping their team alive, but be rather fragile themselves. This is what makes their role super important, and this is what the point of protecting this person would be. And on the flip side, as an assassin character or a brawler or DPS of any kind, that's what should make the enemy healer a high value target. However, that doesn't seem to be the case. Literally everybody is so tanky now. And perhaps the highest to benefit from the tank meta is the Dragon Knight. Now why do I think that is? Well, as we all know, the Dragon Knights have always been tanky. So if you drop them into a meta where being tanky is encouraged, obviously they're going to benefit the most from it. Now close to them is obviously the Necro and then the Warden. If anything, the Warden might actually take the cake at the moment. I personally just don't think it makes sense to have one particular build that can fill all of the roles. Like one of the most discussed topics I see at the moment is that solo players are killing MMOs. Not in the sense that they're literally going out of their way to do it, but in the sense that they're not having a reason to interact with everybody else around them, which was the whole point of an MMO in the first place. But then they put in stuff like the ability to be able to fill all the roles yourself and virtually become indestructible, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. If you give people set roles to play, that encourages more team play than making it so that they can just literally tank the entire team themselves. And it's not only Cyrodiil that suffers from this issue, it's BGs as well, because you'll always see it. There's always the one guy that's got to go over and get 24 kills and 0 deaths, but hasn't touched an objective or even looked at an objective. And then you'll lose the game while he's talking shit to you in chat, and it's like, if you'd brought the amount of firepower you have to the objective, we probably would have won. But because they're off on their own little adventure with their solo indestructible build, they just pretty much think that they're better than everybody else and don't have to play the objective. And to be clear, I'm not against Dragon Knights. I do have a Dragon Knight character myself, as you would have seen from the background footage where I was just testing how survivable it was. And as you'll see in the footage, we ended up giving up and parting ways because nobody was winning this. Now this dude must have been decent enough, because originally I was running around on my Nightblade and was watching him destroy a couple of different groups. Now I can tell he isn't a top tier player because I was watching him miss quite a few of his abilities, which that doesn't take away from the point, that further adds to it, and that's when I decided to test my DK out on him for survivability purposes. Now being that I'm new to the game, I'm not very good either, and as I said, he was missing a lot of abilities too, but that wasn't stopping him destroying a bunch of other groups. He just didn't quite have enough burst to do anything to me. Now while he wasn't a top tier player, he definitely was better than I was. So now usually in a situation like this, the better player would win. However, he just couldn't put out enough damage to be able to kill me, and we ended up parting ways. So the build literally carried it. I even missed a couple of abilities and was overcasting quite a lot. But literally the only thing that carried me through this fight alone was the build. And that's not how it should be. In my opinion, it should never be that a build carries you through anything. The better player should always win. He should have won here. And now if he struggles to kill me, imagine what happens to the players I run into that don't have the amount of resistances and stuff that he has. The way that I have my DK set up, I don't even have to try very hard. Pretty much I just put all my dots out and then I just turtle up and then people just die. There's literally no skill to it. And when you're playing in a group, it's even better. And I don't think that there should ever be one build in particular that's like that. But I don't know, that's just my personal opinion. And that's where I'm going to leave the video. It's okay if you don't agree with the stuff that I say. That's perfectly fine. We're all entitled to our own opinions, despite what some might think. And that's where I'm going to leave the video. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Later, guys.